The newly reported wording in the first Nancy Guthrie Ransom note contains a contradiction that may be more revealing than the multi-million-dollar demand itself. The writer claimed that Nancy was alive. The writer promised that she would be released after payment. But according to the publicly reported wording of the same note, the writer reportedly refuses any further communication and provided no proof that Nancy was actually alive. Now, from an investigative standpoint, that contradiction is difficult to ignore, because if your goal is to collect millions of dollars, then proving that your victim is alive, that's not optional. It's the foundation of the entire ransom demand.
We have your mother, Nancy. She is safe but scared. Those are the first words of the publicly reported ransom note, but by the time you reach the final line, the writer is no longer saying we. He is saying me. That tiny linguistic fracture is not a typo. It is a window, and investigators have been staring at it since the moment the note was unsealed, because it may reveal something far more dangerous than a criminal conspiracy. A single person constructing a fiction in real time. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Endless Cryme. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Imagine standing in a silent evidence room, a single sheet of paper laid flat under a fluorescent light. You are holding a ransom demand for $4 million. The ink is steady, the tone commanding, but there is a hairline crack running through the entire message. It is not in the dollar amount, not in the Bitcoin address, not in the deadline. It is in the pronouns. The note begins as a collective threat. We have your mother. We will hold her. We will release her. Then, deep inside the same message, the writer shifts. You will not be able to contact me. Do not play games. Law enforcement will not be able to help you. Not we, me. In a document designed to project the terrifying weight of a coordinated abduction team, the writer steps out from behind the mask and stands alone. That contradiction is now part of the investigative file, and nobody is talking about it. The note, as reported in court records unsealed by the Maricopa County Superior Court, opens with a clear construction of authority. We have your mother, Nancy. She is safe but scared. She will be held for ransom, and once payment is received, she will be released unharmed. We will be holding her for a maximum of 7 days. Every sentence reinforces the illusion of a group.
Now, with that said, let's look at the first portion of this note. The note reportedly begins as, "Hello, Savannah. We have your mother, Nancy. She is safe but scared. She will be held for ransom, and once payment is received, she will be released unharmed. We will be holding her for a maximum of 7 days." Now let's stop right there, because immediately several things stand out to me. The first is the opening itself. We have your mother, Nancy. Now, we have to ask ourselves something. Why identify Nancy by name? Savannah knows who her mother is. If this communication was truly intended only for Savannah, then simply saying, "We have your mother," it would have communicated exactly the same message. Now, does that prove anything? No, not by itself. There could be several explanations for this. The writer may have wanted the note to sound formal. They may have been following a script that had been seen in a movie or another kidnapping case. Or they may just simply have written awkwardly. But investigators, they notice unnecessary wording, because unnecessary wording sometimes reveals how a person thinks. Was the writer speaking naturally? Or were they trying to sound like what they imagined a kidnapper should sound like?
A group can guard a victim in shifts. A group can watch the family. A group can enforce silence. But the illusion collapses the moment the writer confronts the practical demands of a real negotiation. When threatening the recipient directly, when cutting off communication, when asserting that law enforcement is useless, the writer does not maintain the plural. The writer switches to the singular. You will not be able to contact me. There will be no negotiation. Do not play games. Suddenly the army is one voice, one person pretending to be many. Investigators do not ignore that kind of shift, because it is rarely accidental.
Because if I'm asking someone to transfer $4 million, one thing has to happen before they ever send that money. They have to believe I actually have what I'm claiming to have. And that's where the note begins to fall apart, because nowhere in the publicly reported wording do we see proof of life. No photograph, no video, no audio recording, no handwritten message, nothing that publicly demonstrates that Nancy was alive when this demand was ever made. So I'm not saying that investigators didn't receive something privately. We don't know that. Law enforcement frequently withholds important evidence during active investigations. But based solely on what has been publicly reported, the writer made an extraordinary claim without publicly supporting it. And that's where we're going next, because I believe the biggest weakness in this entire ransom demand isn't the $4 million. It isn't the Bitcoin or even the deadlines. It's what the reporter reportedly failed to provide. And that is proof that Nancy Guthrie was alive. Now, the writer reportedly claimed that Nancy was alive. They claimed that she was safe but scared. They claimed that she would be released after payment. Those are extraordinary claims. But there is one thing that appears to be missing here, and that is proof. From an investigative standpoint, proof of life is one of the most important components of any kidnapping for ransom case. Television and movies have made that phrase familiar, but proof of life isn't Hollywood. It serves as a real purpose. The family needs some reason to believe that their loved one is still alive. And the offender needs the family to believe that payment can still change the outcome. Without that, the entire negotiation becomes much more difficult. Now, proof of life doesn't have to be complicated. It could be a current photograph. It may be a short video or a brief audio recording. Maybe a handwritten note. Or Nancy answering a question that only she and her family would know. Investigators would carefully examine every detail. When it was created, was it edited? Could artificial intelligence have been used? Does the lighting reveal anything? Are there sounds in the background? Can investigators identify a location? Every second of a recording becomes evidence. But according to what has publicly been reported, none of that accomplished the first ransom demand. Now, I want to be careful here, because that doesn't mean that investigators didn't receive additional information privately. They may have. Law enforcement, they often withhold critical evidence during an active investigation. And like I said, we're seeing that in this case. Nothing. We're getting nothing.
In my years in law enforcement, I watched trained behavioral analysts do exactly this work. They isolate every word that feels performative. They look for the sentences where the writer stops playing a role and accidentally reveals who they really are. A genuine co-conspirator note would not normally fracture like that. If two or more people were actively guarding Nancy Guthrie, the communication would likely maintain the plural throughout, because the writer would be speaking on behalf of the group. The shift to me suggests the writer, at some point during the composition, forgot the fiction. That is the moment the mask slipped, and that moment is recorded in ink, permanently. Now, let's set the rest of the note against this fracture. The writer reportedly claimed that Nancy was alive, safe but scared. They demanded $4 million in Bitcoin, with a ticking deadline. They threatened escalation to $6 million. But they refused any further communication. No proof of life, no photograph, no recorded voice, nothing.
Now, let's continue with the reported wording, because the writer also said, "You will not be able to contact me from here on out. There will be no negotiation. Do not play games. Law enforcement will not be able to help you." Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. The writer is demanding $4 million. The amount could increase to $6 million. Yet the family is reportedly told that there will be no further communication, no negotiation, no opportunity to ask questions, and no opportunity to request proof of life. No opportunity to clarify payment instructions. From a behavioral standpoint, that immediately caught my attention, because if money is truly your objective, communication becomes one of the most valuable tools. Now, I'm not suggesting an experienced kidnapper would want lengthy conversations with the family. Far from it. Every communication creates risk. Every phone call, every email, and every message. Every digital connection gives investigators another opportunity to identify you. So limiting communication, it makes sense. Eliminating communication altogether is something very different. If the family has questions about obtaining millions of dollars in Bitcoin, who answers those questions? If something goes wrong with the transaction, who corrects it? If the family says, we need proof that Nancy's alive, who responds? The writer reportedly closed that door before receiving a single dollar.
The family was told there would be no negotiation, no second contact.
Now, one thing that I've learned over my years in law enforcement is this. People often focus on what a criminal says. Investigators, they focus just as much on what the criminal chooses not to say. And that's exactly what would happen here. Investigators, they would examine the language, the sentence structure, the grammar, and the punctuation. They would examine the choice of words and why did the writer begin with we, but later they reportedly referred to me? Was there more than one offender, or was one person simply trying to sound more intimidating? Investigators, they wouldn't get.
If you genuinely have a live victim and you genuinely want millions of dollars, you leave a channel open. You need to collect, you need to reassure. Instead, this writer locked the door. That behavior aligns with someone whose primary objective is not money, it is control of the narrative. A single offender alone, desperately trying to sound like a cell while managing a situation that may have already spiraled beyond repair. One person pretending to be many. And here's the question that reframes this entire story as a thriller, not just a judicial document. If this note is the bedrock of an abduction conspiracy, and its first fracture is already visible in the pronouns on page 1, how long does the writer really have before the entire narrative collapses under forensic scrutiny? Because language betrays, sentence rhythm betrays. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit has spent decades demonstrating that spontaneous utterances, like the pronoun slip from we to me, are far more reliable than the constructed lies around them. The writer built a fortress of words, then left the back gate open, and they probably do not know it. The note contains other decisions that reinforce the solo offender theory. The phrase back in Totzen, for example.
We're going to do here today. The note reportedly continues once payment is received to the Bitcoin address below, she will be released within 12 hours of the deposit to a safe drop-off location back in Tucson. Again, let's stop here because one word immediately caught my attention. Back. The writer didn't simply say that Nancy would be released in Tucson. The writer reportedly said that she would be released back in Tucson. Now, that may not sound significant, but words matter here. If I tell someone that I'm bringing a person back to Houston, the natural assumption is that that person is somewhere else. So, was the writer intentionally suggesting that Nancy had already been moved outside Tucson? Possibly. Or was the writer trying to make investigators believe that she had been moved? That's another possibility. Or was back simply an accidental choice of words? We don't know. And that's an important distinction here because the ransom note alone, it cannot answer that question. Investigators, they don't assume, they verify. If the writer wanted investigators searching outside Tucson, would there be evidence supporting that? Vehicle sightings, license plate readers, cell phone movement, traffic cameras, digital evidence? The words itself prove nothing, but it creates a question.
One observer, watching the house, noting the broken light, aware of the watch on her wrist, could have assembled all of that. What he could not assemble was a consistent narrative voice over the length of the note. The publicly reported second communication made the shift even more pronounced.
Now, let's talk about something else that gives this communication credibility. The writer reportedly referenced Nancy's white Apple Watch and the damaged floodlights outside her home. Those details would matter because they would suggest knowledge connected to the residents. But here's another important point. Knowing details about the scene and committing the crime are not automatically the same thing. Investigators, they would immediately ask, when did those details become known? Who knew them? Who was inside the residence and who discussed them? Could someone have learned them secondhand? Was that information contained, or had it already spread beyond the investigators? This is something that detectives do in almost every major investigation. They build what we often call information timeline. Who knew what and when? Sometimes that timeline becomes just as important as the crime scene itself, because if someone mentions information that should have been known only to investigators, that can become very significant. The reported Apple Watch and the floodlight references they're certainly important, but they don't answer the biggest question. Knowing where the Apple Watch was found does not prove that Nancy was alive when the message was sent. And that's why I keep coming back to proof of life. The writer reportedly established, knowledge of the residents, but not necessarily knowledge of Nancy's condition.
Instead of continuing the ransom demand after the family asked for proof of life, the writer allegedly claimed Nancy had died unintentionally and had been left somewhere in nature. The demand for money evaporated. The group narrative evaporated. What remained was a me story, a panicked, solitary explanation for a tragedy that had already occurred. That is the behavior of one person trying to manage exposure, not a syndicate protecting a financial operation. One person pretending to be many.
But then something changed. The family publicly asked for proof that Nancy was alive. Later, they indicated that they were willing to pay. And that's when the entire narrative reportedly shifted. Instead of continuing toward payment, a second communication reportedly told a very different story. And that's where this investigation becomes even more complicated, because if both messages came from the same person, we have to ask what changed. We'll look at that next. Now, the family had publicly asked for proof that Nancy was alive, and later they indicated that they were willing to pay. From the outside looking in, it appears that the writer had moved closer to achieving the very thing that they had demanded. The opportunity was there. If the money was truly the objective, this was the moment to reinforce the family's confidence, provide proof of life, keep the communications going, move the negotiation forward. Instead, according to the publicly reported information, a second communication changed the entire story. Rather than continuing the ransom demand, the writer reportedly claimed that Nancy had died shortly after being taken. Reports indicated that the message suggested her death was unintentional and that she had been left or buried somewhere in nature. Now, I want to make the same point that I made earlier. There have been differences in the media reporting about the exact wording of this second ransom communication. Until law enforcement publicly authenticates and releases the completed message, we should be careful not to treat every reported sentence as confirmed fact. But even with that caution, one thing is clear. The narrative reportedly changed. The first message said that Nancy was alive. The second message reportedly said that she was not.
So here's what I want you to do. The full text of the first ransom note has been made public through the probable cause affidavit, case number CW 22-4072, available via the Maricopa County Superior Court's public access portal. I want you to read it, not as a headline, but as evidence. Look at the very first sentence. Look at the very last command. Find the exact word where we becomes me. And then ask yourself one direct question in the comments below. Does this read like a coordinated kidnapping crew making a credible financial demand? Or does it read like a single individual, trying desperately to sound like an army and failing on the very first page? If you believe in following the evidence, not the noise, give this video a like, share it with someone who still thinks this was a professional operation, and subscribe to Endless Cryme for more forensic breakdowns that go where the headlines won't. And turn on notifications, because the next document drop could change everything. We'll be here to read between the lines.